We are at that time of the year where we think of Sankranti, Kumbha Mela, and all these kind of festivals which are not only popular in India and abroad, but also have some kind of a linkage to tradition and history. So we had organized this particular evening to showcase some imagery of something that is what we call the Kumbha Mela, but the dimensions of which are really very, very difficult to fathom by sitting here in Calcutta. And the only indirect kind of exposure people like us who have not been on the spot get for such events is through the imagery of other people. And we thought that we would give that benefit to some of our listeners and viewers here. And we had requested Arka Dutta, who is an independent photographer and who has some wonderful images of not only the Kumbh Mela. He has been an independent photographer keen on doing documentary photography and travel photography works on culture, society, social issues, environment, and people. Love for travel and the urge to experience different social, cultural, and environmental affairs and events motivated Orko to take up photography and use it as a mode of expression to portray the facts, events, and stories. He wishes to use photography as a visual medium which can preserve reality and serve as a dialogue for the present and the future. His works and photos have been published in the National Geographic magazine, New York Times, Feature Shoot, NY Times, Dodo Magazine, Social Documentary Network, Washington Post, Creative Magazine, Life Force Magazine, etc., and the list can go on. His current work on Sinking Island of Moshuni was recently given the third prize in Day's Japan Photojournalism Award. And Orko preferred to call this slight talk, as we termed it, as a slight talk on Kumbh Mela and where religion meets tradition and history. So that is what he's going to talk about. So without any further ado, may I request Orko to please take the microphone and make his presentation. And at the end of it, of course, I'm sure there will be some questions from people over here, which he would only be too glad to respond to. Orko, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm here to speak about the experience I had during my visit to Kumbh Mela in Allahabad, and I'm very happy and thankful to get an opportunity and chance to do so here. I made a presentation with some of the photographs that I've took during my visit to the Mela, and I'll be sharing them with you along with some stories and realizations that I had during my stay. Now,
just 1 second, I want to just request everybody to either switch off their mobile phones or put them on silent because the Naga sadhus can get very violent.
So, when it comes to Kumbh Mela, most people talk about the Naga sadhus or the holy bathing. But I myself found out that there is much more to it, much, much more. I've been lucky enough to travel the length and breadth of my country, and I found out that how diverse the tradition, the culture, the customs, and the people are. They literally change for every 100 kilometers or so. But I also found out that in this Mela, that intricate diversity come together, and people from different walks of life, they come here, they stay together, they eat together, they pray together, and I realize it's happened because every one of them believe in a common thing, a common purpose, and this belief has prevailed unchanged over 1,000 of years, and this belief is very sublime. Now, Kumbh, the word Kumbh derives its name from this pot of nectar of immortality. The ancient Puranas tell us of a tale from the bygone days of the universe when the Devtas, the demigods, and the Ashuras journeyed this pot of nectar from the mythical Dudh Sea in some part of cosmos and eventually fought over it. Now, it's said like this task was too sturdy for the demigods alone, so they sought the help of the Asuras, and a mutual agreement was made that the nectar would be divided in equal parts. Now, after many hurdles, when Dhanvantari appeared with this pot of nectar, the demigods, apprehensive of the ill intent of the Asuras, seized the pot forcefully and entrusted it with the four gods: Brihaspati, the Jupiter; Shani, the Saturn; Surya, the sun; and Chandra, the moon. And when when the Asuras know the promise has been breached, they chase the demigods for over a period of 12 days and 12 nights. And it is believed that during this chase, few drop of nectar fell on four places, namely Allahabad, or now it's called Prayagraj, as we know, and Haridwar, Nasik, and Ujjain. And it gave these four places supposedly some mystical power. Now, 12 days of gods are equivalent to 12 years of humankind. So, after every 12 years, this Kumbh Mela is celebrated in one of these four places, and millions of devotees descend on this place to partake in this ritualistic holy bathing, which they believe will purify them or help them to attain some higher level. Now, I uh, so I reached Allahabad late in the evening, and I soon made my way into the entry areas of the Mela, and I was spellbound by the sight. Like there were waves of people coming in constantly, and the lights would stretch as far as I could see, and this glowy golden lights would just seem like the nectar that was believed to have fallen from the sky. And the Mela ground itself is huge. I mean, it's a temporary city by itself. It's actually called the tent city. It magically appears during the days of the Kumbh Mela, and after the last of the devotees are done with their business, it will magically disappear. Now, there are like tents of various kinds, like large ashrams, Swiss tents, and then there would be some tin shanties. It's like massive. And the television shows us feed from about the holy baths or the pilgrims or the religious ceremonies, but most of us don't understand the massive effort that are put together to create an event like this, which would actually give shelter and security and feed the millions of people who will come to attend the Mela. And the next day, when I reached the ground, I couldn't see few feet ahead of me. Like everything was like hidden behind a blanket of fog, but the atmosphere was very peaceful. I could hear the sounds of bells tolling, the muffled sounds of hymns and chants coming from places that I couldn't see. I was walking on this pontoon bridge along with these pilgrims, and suddenly the air would fill up with the sound of several conch shells, shonkhos. And leaving aside the religious importance or aspect of shonkhos, that acoustic of that sound, that tonality or the frequency, did wonder to my mood and my energy, which was not at its best at that time because I hadn't slept well the previous night. So these pilgrims would raise their hand and offer prayer to the unknown source of sound and move along. And later on the day, on the same spot where the sun rose and the fog dissipated, I could see people. I could see people anywhere and everywhere. They're like people from all walks of life. They were like here actually the yogis mingle with the mystic gurus, swamis from the Himalayas, the priests from the down south. There were the schoolboys, corporate types, housewife. Everyone has come either to partake in the bathing or just to witness a spectacle. And they were like lovers, losers, villagers, construction workers. The Mela had something for everyone who have come, and I thought that even the jaded one would come off impressed by the sheer force of faith, if nothing else. And but atmosphere was very vibrant and lively. There were these people who were coming in singing the Lord's name, hands raised high, sometimes clapping, a big smile in their faces. and I would see these women dancing, young and old, and I realized that for them and the others, it was an achievement to able to make it to the Mela, because most of them have taken a very tireless and ardent journey, perhaps from the most remote and distant corners of this country. But this joyous nature was not limited to the pilgrims and the devotees. The sadhus too showed the same level of exuberance. And there are different sadhus also, like from different sects and types. There were the fat sadhus, the thin sadhus, sadhus who had large ashrams, sadhus who were living under the open sky. And always, the most famous one are the Naga sadhus, the India's famed naked holy men. But I found there are other ones too, like the the Parivajaks who took a silence of vow for years, or the Shirashins who would meditate for hours on their head all day long, and there were the Kapilavas who would live the entire duration of the Mela days on the river banks in very austere conditions. And the Harvard University actually is making a study on this Kapilavas in this year's Kumbh Mela, and they believe that such austerity played an important part to increase the immunity of the body. So, and then I would come across a sadhvi like her. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know her identity or any news relating to her, but I could instantly feel there was a positive aura around her. There was a calmness in her face, a calmness in her eyes, which we can see in these photographs, and this calmness was being transmitted to the people around her, including me. And but I'm not a so-called religious person, but being an agnostic one, and by keeping my mind open, I was to perceive certain realizations like this during my stay. And I then thought, like, sometimes you don't need to get into the detailed or religious paraphernalia. Sometimes when you're experiencing a positivity that is coming towards you, you just got to embrace it, welcome it, and walk with it. I think that was good enough. But other times I saw sadhus or the gurus who were more keen to market themselves. His followers would like carry his hoardings twice and thrice their size. A rickshaw would eventually follow them, and a loudspeaker would be mounted on it, churning out the required propaganda in loudness and non-stop. And then I would just turn a corner and enter a small campsite, and would see a sadhu like him, deep in his meditation, oblivious to the tents and the hubbub around him. I think such was the diverse condition over there. And the diversity was in colors too. It was very colorful. A range of colors I could see all around me, be the colorful veils adorned by these women, or the numerous patterns and colorful tent clothings all around. And sometimes they provided me with some interesting backdrops like this. And there was a range of colors everywhere, a palette, anywhere I could see. And maybe with the tents or the shelters or the people themselves with colored hairs, colored blankets. And coming from a city like Kolkata, like a major city like Kolkata, when most of the people over there, I really admired them. Like this old man who's come here with few clothes wrapped inside a blanket, tied with a strip of cloth, uh, a steel can in one hand, maybe a side bag, and most of them have come like this. And the people from the same village would stay in a designated common tent site, or the people having a common guru would take shelter in the tents put up by the Guruji's ashram or trust. And this inside of this tent and the conditions were very simple. Like this is the typical inside of a tent. It's not very simple, nothing fancy. One would call it inadequate, but for them it was not, because they believe they have come here to purify themselves, and they believe that such austerity and that such simplicity played an important part in it. But it was not at all boring. I could see myriads of activity going on inside the tent. Like in the evening, they would enjoy music with musical instruments, sing bhajans and songs, very lively and vibrant. And they would eat, they would be cooking together, eating together, sleeping together. There was always some kind of interaction and activity going on. And I saw men carry their mother and father all the way along, and I realized this is a mark of devotion too, different kinds of devotion, a devotion of love and responsibility. This man was perhaps carrying his mother just to fulfill her wish to see the Mela or take part in it. And then this man was remarkable, incredible. I was having he was from a village near Amravati. I was having a plate of kachori near this group, and when I noticed him and the women, I had a hunch, and I began a normal discussion with this person, and eventually found out that he had three wives, and among the rest, one was his mother, and the rest three was his mother-in-laws, and he has brought them all together in this Mela. And I said, it's remarkable. I mean, wow. I mean, yeah. So, like, I don't entertain myself in Indian TV serials and drama, which are full of melodramas and family problems. And I thought the scriptwriter can take a lesson from this man and this women, and something good would come out eventually, or something different, because they were so happy together. Yeah. And I saw these two young girls dressed as goddesses, happily dancing away, oblivious to their surrounding, their colorful dresses reflecting on their happy faces. They were actually there to seek alms, a better phrase for begging. But I thought to myself, if they can be happy like that in such conditions, they may be, they may be were true goddesses in disguise. In other times, the Mela provided me with interesting characters and textures, like this curtain of jute cloth provided a interesting texture to this photograph of this old man, or this newly washed car window added a surrealistic effect of the photograph of this lady sitting inside. And I met interesting character all along. This sadhu, who has wrapped himself around with rudraksh, I asked him why, he wouldn't reply. Someone told me that he's taken a vow of silence and wouldn't speak for years. It is difficult to know if it's true or not, but being as an observer, as a witness to this spectacle, and as a photographer, I was more than happy to just come across these interesting characters and such short intervals of time. And I found out about a very interesting group or sect of people over there during my visit, the Ramnamis. I met this lady who was part of the Ramnami sect. The Ramnami people live in central part of India, and the founder of this sect had actually tattooed Ram Nam all over his body as a mark of protest to the upper caste people for social discrimination and to save himself from physical abuse. And his follower followed them, followed his customs, and created this Ramnami Samaj. I became very intrigued about them. I later went to their villages near Bilaspur and made a different set of photographs. And then I went inside this Naga Akra, and this man came towards me running with his mace held high above his head. I was like very scared, cowering, and at the last moment I realized he's just making fun of me and scaring me at the same time. He was not going to hit me, and I was relieved. This is one of the supervisors of the Naga Akra. He's there to control the Naga sadhus when they went towards the river on the days of Shahistan. And I had a really painful experience with one of them that I'll come to later, but not him, someone else. But this mace was made of silver, or at least silver plated, and it was very heavy, and I was very thankful that he had no intention to hit me actually. And I was actually enjoying this total atmosphere, like innumerable pair of eyes making contact with my eye all the time, and we couldn't escape it. Like I couldn't escape it, and I was not trying to escape that, because we were all there thrown together, making a veritable river by ourselves, moving along here and there, meeting interesting people all the way. And whenever I wandered toward the river banks, I would see a blanket of people, a dense crowd. But in that dense crowd, various people were engaged in various kind of activities all the time. someone was lost, someone was offering puja, or this lady who was standing there like this for quite a time. I understood that she was standing like in this posture because she didn't find a place to hang her wet clothes dry, and she stood like this of, until her sari got dried. So it's a simple thing, but I found that interesting. This mother who was giving his son a mundan, offering the hair for gods or some puja. He was not at all liking it, but I thought the expression of the mother would make the photograph interesting. And this man, he was there for hours like this, head buried in the ground. I mean, biologically it's impossible, otherwise the scientists and the biologists would come and would take him away and do experiments on him. But I knew, like, even like there is a passageway, air passage or pipe would that would eventually end up just beneath that mat or blanket that was laid on the ground. But keeping aside the trickery, I admired him. I mean, he was there in this condition for hours, and that was a feat in itself, and that is the reason I admired him. So I remember one day was very rainy. It was raining from very early morning. It was chilly, it was muddy, it was windy. Everyone was cooped inside their tent and shelter. Others were could just try to ward off the rain with whatever things they can get hold of. I was walking barefoot that day because it was difficult to walk in such muddy conditions in your shoes. I was trying to find something interesting, and then I would find this young newlywed girl standing here just like that against a backdrop which was in complete contrast to her attire and social condition. And I thought this was interesting frame to me, and a beautiful one too. And sometime later, her husband would come, would take her hand and lead her towards the river for some puja. And I thought this photograph was romantic as well in such conditions. And yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and the later that time, my father rickshaw puller was having difficulty to pull the rickshaw with his two portly riders.